All right, thank you. So the topic of the discussion today is primarily going to be data and analytics maturity model and how they can be used within your organization, both as an assessment to see where you rank compared to your industry peers, as well as provide guiding points for you as you try to juggle a large number of moving pieces within the analytics environment at your organization. If you want to download the slide deck, I would highly recommend it. I go through the slide presentation fairly quickly here, and I'm not going to go over individual details, so it'd be best to download it from bit.ly/bmdmm for Big Mountain Data Maturity Model. We're also looking for a lot of feedback for the individual sessions. So if you have an opportunity at the end of any of the sessions, please provide feedback on the feedback link, which you'll find on the left side of the LoudSwarm interface. What is Big Mountain? What is the data maturity models? It's really talking about finding out where we are, where we want to go, how are we going to get there? It's also about keeping an eye on lots of moving pieces. Within an organization's analytics structure, we have multiple core areas that we work on, and the maturity model splits out into a number of different core areas that are oftentimes called categories or components, and their associated subcategories. So within the Delta maturity model, which stands for Data, Enterprise, Leadership, Targets, and Analytics, there are a number of areas that we want to pay attention to, and we oftentimes get distracted. We may put something on the back burner and not realize that we need to address it in the future. For instance, data quality issues could surface, but they oftentimes don't become a top priority until there is a problem. We want to be sure and address issues before they become problems. We want to ensure that our analytics teams are properly trained, that we've got good career paths for them. We want to ensure that we've got executive buy-in for the programs and engagement with departments throughout the organization. And for each of these components, there's a maturity level measurement for each of the subcategories, and those are rolled up into a score within each of the main categories or core components. So for instance, we might look at all of the subcategories for the data structure that we saw here, and we might want to give them a ranking from 1 to 5. Some models are 1 to 7, some are from 1 to 4. We rank each individual subcomponent. We roll those up into a score for data, and then we roll that up into a score to be able to say a top organization in analytics would be ranking at a 4. A typical organization might be running at about a 2.5 to 3, depending on your maturity model scale. And you'll be able to identify what are the areas that you're really excelling at, and you're going to provide this survey to lots of members of your analytics community, different stakeholders throughout the organization that interact with the analytics community to see what's their view of it. We don't want to look at just our own view of how we think we're doing. We want to get buy-in from our customers and stakeholders. Further drilling down to the different data models, we take the core areas such as data governance. We split that into subcategories or capabilities in the case of the DCAM model here. And then for each of the capabilities, they split capability into sub-capabilities and then identify objectives and potential questions they may want to be asking to ensure that those objectives are being met, as well as artifacts indicating that this structure is in fact in place, such as having a data dictionary or having roles clearly defined for your organization. The DCAM model splits up different core components into 31 capabilities or subcategories. 106 of the sub-capabilities, and then 353 objectives. So the data model does go into a lot of detail, but does tend to stop at the objective level. It doesn't go into implementation details. This is my favorite quote that I found for if I was to talk to someone about data maturity models and what they mean in 15 seconds, I would try and refer to this quote by Rand Corporation at rand.org. Data and analytics maturity models reflect commercial benchmarks and provide a roadmap for improving analytics capabilities. An organization's journey using the roadmap will vary. For example, not every capability needs to achieve the highest level. What this means is if we use a standard model, we can compare our progress to that of our peers and competitors. We can also identify areas that we are interested in pursuing further or areas that we might need to be aware of, but we're not going to enter into engagement within our organization. For instance, a top analytic capability might be working with unstructured data, but that might not be something that's appropriate for our organization in the short term, and we might want to identify it as a long-term goal to be aware of. A little bit about me. I work at Select Health Intermountain Healthcare as a consultant data architect. And I received my master's in information from technology from Carnegie Mellon back in 2015. And we've been engaging with a number of the different alum from the program, looking at different evaluations of analytic maturity models. So this is really sharing what we've discovered so far as we're about to launch into some new analytics maturity models within different organizations. It's unclear whether we'll be looking at new analytic maturity models at Select Health or Intermountain Healthcare, but we've got groups that are engaging at General Motors with different analytic maturity models. We have groups at Amazon that are looking at the models to be able to identify what areas they would like to focus on next and prioritize their different programs, their different objectives within their programs. Key component is being able to look at the various different components and subcategories within the maturity model and have an idea of how we're doing with that model and which subcategories we really want to focus on next. The CMMI's DMM, which I always get this wrong, it's not a data maturity model, it's a data management model, if I'm remembering that one right. It consists of 6 different core components and then splitting that into 25 different components that you may want to consider within your organization. Most organizations should need at least an introductory level for all of these areas. And many of the organizations we talked with were finding areas like data lineage, data quality, disaster recovery, were areas that they were oftentimes putting on the back burner. They were hoping to get to, and they needed to put on their radar for typically what they were doing is identifying one category per month to really focus on that. And some broad categories such as data governance, they would allocate 2 months out of the year to really focus on ensuring that they're implementing best practices and doing at least the very minimum that an organization in their industry should be engaging in within each of those areas. We also want to make sure that we're coming to consensus on these areas within all of the departments in the organization. We don't want to look at our own belly button and say, we're looking good. We want to look at and engage our stakeholders and ensure that they feel they are getting the data quality that they need, that they feel that they have a single source of truth and are receiving the reports that they need in a timely fashion. So it's engaging with the different departments to ensure that they're buying into the data governance solution, which can be timely and cost costly within the organization. So we want to make sure that they have the support, that they are supporting the data governance endeavors, and that they know why we are putting those steps into place. The last point I want to make on this slide is ensuring that oftentimes within a data analytics organization, we look at the tools we have and we define what can we do with those tools. What we really need to be doing is engaging with the departments, identifying their business needs, and determining the results that we're going to be striving toward. We don't want to be doing predictive analytics when what the company is really looking at is getting out the reports that they need and being able to identify customer needs more in a more engaging fashion, in a timely fashion. So looking at the high level picture of what data maturity models are before we start drilling down into the details, it's really about reverse engineering proven successful deployments. The maturity models were built by engaging large numbers of organizations. In the case of CMMI, they engaged 70 different organizations, at least 60 different reviewers, companies like Microsoft, Bose Allen, Hamilton, a number of other organizations to identify what their best practices were and what are the best practices at organizations that have reached a state of maturity. The definitions involved in the maturity model are also very broad. They tend to be very concise, and they're broad at a policy level statement to identify this is a policy we're implementing at our organization, but it's not an implementation of how to roll out a particular program. It's not how to design your data dictionary. It's stating that we will have a data dictionary that is updated and peer reviewed. As a framework, the framework is really providing the skeleton of the structure rather than the meat of how we're going to be deploying it. We're going to take blueprints on top of the framework, which are ideally a standard across multiple organizations if we're going to be able to compare ourselves to others in the industry and know where we might want to progress in comparison to others. But we might also want to customize the blueprint to meet our particular needs. So for instance, the instance of a database needing unstructured data, that might be something that we identify as not needing with our organization. We may be saying we need to implement a database that can handle JSON or XML, or we need to ensure that based upon our executive structure and departmental engagement, how we are engaging with the individual stakeholders. Another area that we want to consider is the awareness of the multiple areas that we should be aware of, ensuring we don't forget about data quality, data governance. We don't put them on the back burner, and we start identifying multiple paths that we could move toward, but not necessarily that we want to move toward. We want to look at our different options and our different destinations as to where we would like to be and where does it strategically make sense for our organization to succeed. So getting ready to drill down into some of the maturity model examples, want to go over some of the benefits and downsides to the maturity models. What we heard when we talked with various people and we listened to a lot of webinars is one of the key takeaways was it was a relief from unknown risk, that they didn't a lot of times the analytics organization knew that there were lots of potential problems that could occur, but they weren't aware of what the business was really concerned with. And they weren't aware of how the departments were engaging with the analytics team from an independent survey. Getting an independent consultant to come in and say, hey, how are these guys doing? To get that feedback to say, this is what, as an organization, we really want people to focus on. It also helps you to identify where your strengths are, the areas that you're able to excel in, and you can use as a competitive advantage to being able to roll out new products. Gap analysis of what are some of the shortcomings and recommendations as to what steps the consultants feel that you would best be able to benefit by implementing, and then you need to evaluate within your organization based upon your familiarity of the organization where you should really be going. The other key component that launched a number of initiatives was ensuring that we reduce technical debt. The technical debt is ensuring that you're not ignoring aspects of your rollouts that will end up coming back and biting you, that's slowing down your ability to move forward and potentially opening you up to risk of failed projects and outage conditions. The other benefit is being able to compare, as I've mentioned, to other industry competitors to be able to see where you're standing. Different industries will have different benchmarks. And then some of the models are collecting that information in a central location so that they can provide those benchmarks. Other models are simply put out there for individual people to roll out and engage with and really do more of a self-assessment than an industry assessment. So looking at what a model, data maturity model is and what it is not, it's the state of the industry practices. It's not state of the art implementations. This isn't how Amazon is introducing a new functionality that no one else has rolled out before. This is rolling out a better practice than individual organizations may be implementing today, but it's not a bleeding edge technology that could be at high risk of just failing because no one's done it before. It's also not a maturity model analysis of the IT organization. It's really focused on a cross-departmental collaboration to identify what the analytic needs are of the organization. And many of the outcomes are illustrative snapshots that give you a very quick view of we score 3.5 out of 5. And it provides you with some potential directions toward being able to move up to the next level. It's not going to engage with the implementation details of how to roll out a particular solution like data quality solutions, or provide tool recommendations, or specify this is the policy that you should cut and paste into your organization's handbook. So some of the downsides for the maturity models, there can be a very high cost of adoption. Oftentimes it's engaging with a consulting organization for 6 weeks to roll out the surveys, look at the results, come up with recommendations, present to your executive team, and provide you direction moving forward. There's also a very high cost of crossing the chasm. Typically, this might be crossing from level 3 to 4. A lot of organizations see if they're moving from level 1 to 2, that's a fairly easy step. But moving from 3 to 4 can be taking 3 times longer, and it can be costing quite a bit to implement a lot of individual tools to meet those needs. It can also lack alignment to your current and future challenges. It's providing suggestions on ways that destinations you might want to visit. They might suggest Hawaii is a fantastic place to visit, but what you're really looking for is a trip up to Tahoe to do some skiing. If you're not interested in an unstructured data within your organization, you may not want to spend a lot of time focusing on that. There's also a lot of false senses of security. If you score really high, it may lead you to believe that your organization is doing really well and you start slacking on individual areas. Similar to rolling out a firewall at your organization, it blocks one individual area of security threats, but it doesn't necessarily eliminate all of the security threats that people may be encountering. It's also evaluating the presence of the functionality, saying that you have a data dictionary, but might not be saying that you have a quality data dictionary. Many of the models are not evaluating what the quality is. Some of the organizations are evaluating what the importance of this feature is to your organization. And there's a lot of maturity models that might not, a lot of maturity levels that might not be justifiable for the returns that you would be seeing. Your organization could well decide, we don't want to cross the chasm in this area. We want to stay at level 3 rather than moving to level 4. And we'll wait for the industry to catch up to us at level 3, and then wait for other models to become more mature, more processes to become more mature, so that's easier to cross that chasm later on. And if we're not using a single approved consistent report across all of the industries that are surveyed, we're not going to be able to perform those benchmarks. The big question all of the executives ask is, can we get a major ROI from the success in the organization? And Dell published an article that I wasn't able to find, but the outcomes were published in a CIO link, which is provided in the notes section of the slide here, stating that when Dell rolled out their maturity model implementations, they were able to lower their BI spending by 50%. They were, I can't see this section with the video. There we go. They were able to increase the predictive analytics capabilities by 20%. They were able to increase the revenue by millions of dollars. These results have not been reviewed and published by lots of organizations using maturity models. It's very hard to quantify the return on investment, because there are many aspects that you are engaging in, and it might be you rolled out the maturity model in order to launch a new product, and that new product is what really is increasing your revenue rather than the maturity model. But looking at a webinar that IIA provided, the International Institute of Analytics, they provided a lot of very strong correlations between having a successful analytics maturity model and the success of organizations. So for instance, this is a model that is looking at revenue and operating income for various organizations that engaged in maturity model assessments for stage, and their results showed that they were in stage 2, stage 3, or stage 4, and what type of returns they got. So clearly the stage 4 individual groups are getting much better results on operating income and revenue on a 3, 5, and 10-year return compared to people at lower maturity levels. But what we want to be understanding here is a lot of the people that are at stage 4, these are the emerging digital natives. These are the organizations that launched without brick and mortar industries. So they're leading their revenue cycles already. So even if you eliminate those groups from the stage 4 analytics, you're still seeing twice as revenue increases that are twice as high as those in stage 3. And if you want to look at the details, I'd advise in regards to the strong correlations they were able to identify take a look at the video. Go ahead and jump over to 26 minutes and watch from that section on. The rest of the video is quite good. From 26 minutes on, it focuses particularly on the ROI correlations, and they emphasize that these are correlations, they're not necessarily causations, meaning the analytics maturity model may not have built this environment, but it certainly is so highly correlated with the success of organizations that people should be looking at it. So let's look at some of the use cases for implementing maturity models. Want to provide a couple of quick use cases for failed projects, outage conditions, and experiences that organizations had when they were engaging in audits after and before they had their maturity models developed. So we've all heard that data analytics oftentimes is 80% cleansing and collecting the data. And a lot of the models that the components of the maturity model are putting operations in place, processes and policies, so that we can improve that collection and cleansing time. We can identify where the data is, we can identify the best source of that data, we can through data dictionaries, we can define what something truly means. So when we talk about students at a university report, the students oftentimes are categorized as full-time, part-time, remote, graduate students, and it can be different reports can come up with significantly different numbers for the number of students because they have different definitions. So having that data dictionary, providing the peer reviews of the data dictionary so that as it's evolving over time and people are asking questions, we're able to frequently update the information to provide the most accurate source of relevant data to the organization, as well as providing access control and usage tracking so that you could identify who's using this data source, correcting them to use a newer data source, and notifying them that a new data source is available. And oftentimes we saw that this was a successful quick launch by, rather than trying to identify and put a data dictionary out there, which is incomplete when it starts out, is finding your experts within your business units, find your subject matter experts, identify them, and simply calling them out as a contact for if you have questions, go to this person. And that person can start documenting the repeat requests that come in so that they don't have to answer the same question time and time again, and they can identify the particular needs for their organization. Speaking of data dictionaries, we engaged with a number of different discussions on different organizations that failed in their rollouts of data dictionaries. One of the organizations had 4 internal and external tool projects that were created, and they were dropped. They were dropped because of scope creep, platform changes. They changed from one vendor to another before they were able to deploy the change. And many of these projects had turned into 3-year projects that were abandoned after 2 years and saw no return on investment at all after they were being dropped. The root cause analysis identified a lot of areas that maturity models could have avoided. The methods for rotating through different tool adoptions could have been addressed. The idea of how a project is mothballed so that the information can be brought back in when the project is starting over again. It's not starting over from scratch, it's starting over from where things were left off. And a number of different organizations were feeling that there were a lack of organizational structure and sponsorship that were leading toward a lot of the failures. So one organization didn't have the executive sponsorship that they needed. So when it came to costly endeavors and engaging with departments, they felt that they didn't have the executive buy-in to commit the resources of the subject matter experts to advance those areas. The departmental resource commitments were highly aligned with the executive sponsorship, and many of the people we were talking to, they felt that having a centralized analytics center rather than a distributed organization that was meeting the needs of individual departments and could focus on big picture items that are shared across the organization, like data dictionaries, and could provide guidance on best practices within the departments, would have been particularly helpful. Another instance was really embarrassing to an individual organization when they had a very simple change to their transactional database where they were changing a particular field in the database from a varchar 80 to a wider text field of a varchar 120. They rolled out the change, concentrating on the transactional tool that was using this, and they rolled it out within, ensuring that the tool was operating, but they failed to notice that the ETL was also relying upon that change. It ended up failing, the downstream reports failed, and then there was an executive dashboard that was not available when a board of directors team happened to be visiting, and they weren't able to show some of the core analytics that they were hoping to show within the organization. This could have easily been prevented by some simple standard protocols that are common within most organizations, but hadn't been implemented to engage between the product engineering team and the analytics team to implement change control, data lineage to identify what changes will affect processes downstream, quality monitoring to identify if a data import didn't complete, that don't run the new reports based upon that incomplete data, run it perhaps using the previous day's successful data, and communication to ensure that when changes occur, they are communicated to all affected parties. Wrapping up, the case for audit management, many of the audits were finding that 65 to 75% of the actionable audit findings were related to data. And a lot of the organizations were required to do audits for regulatory compliance or simple due diligence, but a lot of the organizations were also wanting to do internal audits to be able to see where are we and how can we be doing things better? What are their peers doing well? How are we comparing to our peers? How can we reduce risk of failures and outages within our organization? And how can we improve our processes by reducing time, cost, and increasing quality for the various solutions? So looking at the actual specific data maturity models, there are lots of maturity models that are available. They just seem to be coming out time and time again. And in addition to the models, the new models coming out, there are a lot of models that are being expanded or evolving or just plain disappearing off of the market. For instance, the Iia Delta model added 2 more areas, the technology and analytics, I believe, to create the Delta Plus model. DCAM added in an 8th component for analytics, and the CMMI data DMM is adding in a security area for cybersecurity, which they should be rolling out in the next couple of months. There's also a lot of maturity models that are emerging for specific areas that Products and platforms are rolling them out. There's Microsoft Azure rollouts, IBM Product Maturity Model solutions. There's solutions by industry. The federal data.gov has a maturity model that they're fairly aggressively rolling out, that they've taken a lot of the practices from existing maturity models and refined them to their individual needs. Financial industry is succeeding really well with their maturity models. And there's a lot of subject areas that are developing maturity models around them, such as cybersecurity is going to be appearing in the next couple of months. There are already some maturity models for big data, data science, and open data, or how to share your data with a large public population. I want to look at 3 specific examples of data models. The CMMI data maturity model is taking a look at the time and the pace to be able to go through these. The CMMI model I chose to reference because it's one of the original historic models that was launched. DataBlueprint.com had produced several webinars that are really great to go and take a look at and get a better idea of what's happening with maturity models. But unfortunately, DataBlueprint.com ceased operations due to COVID-19 in July of this year. The IIA International Institute of Analytics has the Delta model that we've seen, and it provides a good breadth of assessments across a large number of industries. And then the EDM Council DCAM model, they started out focusing on the financial industries, but they've had 30% of their respondents in a recent survey of results using their DCAM model were people outside of the financial services industry. So they've seen a lot of success with their model, and other organizations in other industries adopting the model because they liked what they saw. So the CMMI DMM component, we've seen this slide before, that's breaking down 6 components into 25 subcategories. And it launched as part of the SEI, the Carnegie Mellon's Software Engineering Institute, which was responsible for launching the capability maturity model used in software development. That was developed using multiple maturity models, combining them together from 1987 to 97 to produce a fantastic capability maturity model for software development that's frequently updated and used by a lot of organizations. I'm really hoping that in the future, their data maturity model would be able to consolidate a lot of the maturity models that are out there, refine the results from those, and produce another version of the data maturity model that becomes standard and adopted by large numbers of organizations to be able to compare across industries more accurately. The CMMI Institute, they provide training, certification, assessments for an organization and resources, but one of the primary takeaways is the DMM Book, which is available for $100. It's 228 pages, and it's describing the framework for a data maturity model, the questions that you should be asking, why you should be focusing on individual areas, and some of the things that you should be including within your organization. Or some, I really loved this video where they engaged with the state CIOs in a regular webinar that they present, and they were able to see a lot of benefits from their rollout with the state of Arizona. Particularly the cross-departmental collaboration to develop multiple maturity models across different organizations. They were able to identify the departments that really succeeded well and start reducing or I'm sorry, identify the departments that were doing components really well, and then take a look at other departments that weren't doing so well at those areas and cross-training each other. And a lot of the departments had strengths in different areas where they were able to do a lot of internal training. One of the comments they had was that it was really building the forest through the trees, that looking at one component at a time, they were able to start individually building out this larger and larger forest by taking one component at a time, increasing its maturity level to the point that they started feeling comfortable. And one of the unexpected areas that they were seeing is the ability to accept new policies that were being rolled out. If they were being rolled out based upon widely accepted industry practices, rather than something that an individual analytics person thought would be a good idea, they got a lot more acceptance of the individual policies. So that acceptance rate went a long ways toward having industry best practices. The IIA Delta model, I'm going to go through these quick so that we can wrap things up on time. Again, they expanded their Delta model to include technology and analytics technologies, have a lot of the individual subcategory details that you can start drilling into. And they have oftentimes, they'll roll out the assessments in a number of different ways, but a typical way would be a 6-week assessment broken down by individual departments, engaging with the teams, doing training in a conference training organization, identifying their strengths, the priorities for where they could see the greatest impact, and engaging in surveys. This is a couple of details on how they would assess the models at a very high level, but you would never use this for the actual survey. It just gives you a rough idea of what's included at different maturity levels. Identifying the areas that they are particularly succeeding at, areas that are high priority, high importance, and would be particularly effective at providing new solutions. They kind of highlight those to focus on what to work on next. And they provide the industry-specific standards. So you can look at the individual departments to see where things are succeeding, where as an industry you might be comparing. So healthcare insurance is just below a 3, whereas the digital native environments tend to score significantly higher. And then the breadth of the scoring. So digital natives consistently scored up high at 4, whereas under manufacturing, even though they averaged a 3, the range of maturity models was quite significant. And then wrapping up the DCAM model, this one I like for their openness for sharing what their results are. It's very clear, and rather than copywriting a lot of their information, they engage in webinars and show a lot of what their maturity model includes for free. So you can get a really good idea of what you're potentially engaging in without having to make commitments to engage with their consulting groups. I like the way that they presented things in a very clean, consistent fashion, similar to CMMI. They provide a very clean, systematic, consistent format for each of their areas, but just a little bit cleaner presentation within DCAM. And the results that they have oftentimes are similar across the different assessment final scores, showing the different areas and the different ratings that an organization might be at, identifying their shortcomings, and then they might also include an area of where are the goals that they would like to be achieving in those areas. Again, they're expanding far past the finance industry. 30% of the respondents from a very comprehensive survey that they shared the results on from lots of different industries. You can take a self-assessment training for $14.50 as a non-member. Memberships are at an organizational level, and as a non-member, you can take the training, which gets you access to the complete model, and it's offered virtually and on a quarterly basis. There's an upcoming model on November 6th, I believe, or November 3rd, fairly quickly here. And there are about 40 people that are signed up for that already. So to get a quick start on how to implement this, I would suggest going and taking a look at the Pricewaterhouse CMU survey. This is a free 10-minute survey that I like the best. There are several other assessment models, but I found this one to be the most detailed and provide some industry analysis to give you some ideas of how others scored within the various industries. The survey includes 6 different components. It does take just 10 minutes where you specify where you feel your current state is and what you would like your future state to be. And you're basically selecting, do I feel that we are at level 1 on this component? You could potentially be at level 3 for a particular area. And here are some of the examples of areas. So within analytics, there would be this kind of predictive analytics at level 5. You could implement predictive analytics before you have engaged in descriptive analytics to provide historical reports. And overall, the maturity models that you want to look at have numerous components and numerous maturity levels. The maturity levels really vary quite a bit, but they're generally all the same, just at a little bit different scale, 1 to 5 or 1 to 7. And the key component is, are the components relevant to your individual organization? There's lots of different maturity levels. Each model seemed to have its own label, such as, is it a leading organization or a laggard organization? Is it a learning or innovator? Is it analytically unaware or analytic nirvana? All of these are different scales that you could be ranked at, but generally they're just 1 to 5. They just have different names. Different components often engage with technology, people, and processes that can be broken down a number of different ways, but they oftentimes have very significant similarities at the sub-capability level. And there are a lot of failed maturity model discussions. These tend to be focused on when a maturity model rolls out and all it contains is the maturity level. It doesn't specify individual components. So one of the simple models that Gartner put out, they have more complex models, was describing descriptive versus predictive analytics. And like I mentioned before, you can skip ahead to completely skip descriptive analytics and roll out a predictive analytics model and say, hey, we're at a level 4, when you're really lacking a lot of the individual components that you would expect to see in those solutions. I see that we are running out of time, Keith. How are we? Do we have a hard cutoff?
That would be more up to Greg, I think. I'm not sure if they closed the room or need to, stop the recording or anything. I know I can keep going, and if people stay on.
Okay. I'm going to wrap up. You can find me on LinkedIn if you want to engage individually afterwards. Happy to share some of the findings that we had in greater detail if there were particular questions that you had, especially a lot of people have questions about their individual industry and what results we may have found there. So a quick overview to wrap things up on what are the next steps that you would be taking? You might do a 6-week rollout with an organization. That could be expensive and it's engaging, but it might be something that your organization isn't ready to start on right away. What I would suggest is becoming more familiar with the data maturity models. The DAMA produces the DMM Book 2. There's some follow-up slides on that that talks about a lot of the different, more at an implementation level and best practices in a greater detail than the maturity model assessments. CMMI, you can purchase a PDF of the data management maturity model for $100 to get an idea of the questions that they ask and the subcategories that they offer. And DCAM has a lot of webinars that are free that I talk about next. And they also have that 1450 training. It's a 2-day, 6 hours each day, offered on a quarterly basis. And there's a lot of free solutions you could engage in as well. There's lots of webinars that are recorded. I particularly liked a lot of the DCAM webinars that were presented by their president of their organization, and Dataversity also put out a lot of material, consistent webinars, I think on a monthly basis. Take the free Pricewaterhouse Analytics Survey in 10 minutes. You can take a look at a couple of academic papers that did a critical analysis of the different maturity models, and this master's thesis did a great job of explaining a walkthrough of a typical assessment experience, that some of the results that they kind of did as a mock-up for their thesis. And you can also connect with local chapters of the DAMA. There's a Rocky Mountain chapter in Colorado. And wrapping up with some quick references, the Data Management Body of Knowledge book. This you can download the book or buy the hard copy of the book. It's not included with the DAMA international membership, which is $50 per year if you want to join that organization. You can buy the book. Here's a couple of the chapters and just kind of some screenshots. In particular, I'd recommend taking a look at the preview that's available on Amazon.com. And it looks like you can sign up for free for the DAMA Rocky Mountain chapter without having to do the $50 international sign up. There are 23 chapters available around the US in different states. Was considering whether having a Utah chapter would be beneficial, and then 28 international chapters of the organization. They have a lot of monthly webinars and recordings and presentations of their previous presentations available. So in concluding, want to reference Peter Drucker's quote, "Don't say that was a great presentation. Tell me what you're going to do differently on Monday." This is the type of feedback that a lot of presenters would like to hear at the end of their sessions. It doesn't apply to this session as much as all of the sessions. Give the people feedback, let them know how they can improve, what you liked best, and action items you can take. Provide feedback on that feedback page. I want to wrap up, last slide, on thanking Pat Wright, the many volunteers, and our fantastic sponsors for putting together this event. It's a lot of work to put these events together. I know that there have been a lot of people that have put in a lot of late nights getting things together. And I know that Pat and the sponsors and the volunteers all really appreciate the thanks that you can provide for sharing the knowledge that people have throughout our community. So thank you. And I apologize for running late. I hope that you have a fantastic rest of the day and engage in lots of good knowledge sharing. Provide that feedback and take a look at some of the recorded sessions that you may have missed yesterday. Thank you again.
John, there are a few questions in the Slack. Do you want to just look at that later offline? Do you want me to mention any of them that went by? It's totally up to you.
Sure.
I can read them off. I have it here. So I mean, one person was just asking how they could download it since their company blocked access to Dropbox. I assume they could just load it from home and then mail it to themselves or something would probably be easiest. But if there's another way.
Right. So I Dropbox is blocked for us as well. So download it from your home computer. I would be happy to email it to you. If you send me an email at john.weeks@gmail.com, I'd be happy to send an email copy of that. I don't think I can share it on Slack, or I'm not aware of another place. If there is another place I can share it to, I would be happy to do that as well. Or anyone who has downloaded it can feel free to share it.
And then there was a question about, I think this is a very new topic to a lot of people. And so there was some request for from a very, very high level, like what does a data dictionary look like? How do you know that you need one, or how would you go about, I think, creating your own might, at least that's how I understood the question.
So there's a lot of areas that are fairly complex to roll out, particularly data governance. And many people will put the data dictionary under data governance. Some people will say, no, that's really under data management in general. So a data dictionary is really helpful for being able to an organization typically will say, I need this report, or I need this predictive model, and I need this data. And the data dictionary is a source to be able to go and identify where can I find that data. So it can take multiple forms. A lot of organizations tie it directly to their database tables and columns, that they will add in the metadata for the columns and the tables describing the contents of those. That can be effective, but a more effective solution can be a searchable interface. There's lots of tools that are out there that help you do peer-reviewed community-driven data dictionaries, where you can say, I need to find out where to find our part-time student information. And then you can do a search, find the various aspects of student data sources. What are some of the best data sources? We've rolled out a couple of them where we tried to use content management solutions to simply publish a open shared document, and that became kind of unmanageable really quick. There were a lot of areas that needed multiple pages to describe them. We would need a good screenshot for a line of business description at various levels of lines of business. That could be included in the data dictionary to be able to better understand information that the subject matter experts that know the individual data are really sharing. So generally, it's a place to go when you need to find the data for a new project, a place to go to be able to find that data quickly.
Great, and I think there's one other question that at least I'm able to comprehend and translate, is along the lines of, is there an application that one might use to create their data dictionary? or is this more of like a living document that people would refer to and you would build it in, well, I guess as any kind of document?
There are some really good tools for building the data dictionary. I have a favorite that we haven't implemented, but I've talked with a lot of people that have implemented it, and I can connect with me individually. I'll try and look it up and put that out on the Slack channel. You can create a homebrewed solution, but it's prone to failure. As I mentioned before, scope creep can really build it out very quickly, but certainly start simple. The best suggestion I have when you're starting out is identify your business subject matter experts. Simply put them as for student registration, contact this person. For distance learning, contact this person. And then have that person start identifying the needs that you should be including within the data dictionary.
Great, thanks, John. I think I speak for everybody when I say thank you so much for devoting your time and effort to this. It was very interesting to me, and there were lots more questions. It just kind of, they were coming as they were going. I think it would probably be helpful for people to email you and ask their more specific questions, since we are getting to be over time.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and I will engage in Slack right now. I'll do Slido after I finish looking at the Slack connections. Thanks, Keith. Appreciate your help.
Oh yeah, absolutely welcome. It was a pleasure.